with programs that seek to cultivate a new generation of wise thinkers and good leaders. It's a pleasure to work with tremendous partners in the UK and around the world, including the St. Gallen Symposium in the Global Leadership Challenge. And it is my privilege to be chairing this panel discussion today at the 50th Symposium, Trust Matters. We're focusing in this section on the theme of gaining trust as a young public leader. How do young public leaders gain the trust they need to successfully deliver on their ideas and aspiration to affect change for the good in local communities at national, even international level? It's not straightforward. If trust in leaders is an expression of confidence that they will deliver on their promises, how can leaders build that confidence when they are still establishing their own track record? And how can leaders navigate challenging generational dynamics, building the confidence of an older generation of leaders who are existing and in power with a younger generation of up-and-coming contemporaries? It can sometimes seem that the older generation will only trust young leaders who are committed to their system and way of seeing. But if the younger generation doesn't trust the system as it stands and will only trust young leaders who are committed to doing things differently, gaining the trust of one generation perhaps seems at odds with gaining the trust of the other. It isn't straightforward. But fortunately for us this morning, we have three incredible panelists, senior political public leaders in their own right, who have experienced navigating these very issues to help us this morning. Zarifa Ghaffari is the mayor of Maidan Wardak province in Afghanistan, the first female mayor in Afghanistan's history of 26. She pursued her higher studies at the University of Punjab in Pakistan. Ms. Ghaffari is a staunch advocate for democracy, human rights and the empowerment of women. And having been sworn in as mayor in March 2019, has faced many challenges and overcome them, including threats of violence from the Taliban and from ISIL. Zarifa was chosen as an International Woman of Courage in 2020 by US Secretary of State and is a St. Gallen Leader of Tomorrow. Along with Zarifa, Milojko Spajic is Minister of Finance and Social Welfare in the government of Montenegro and the cabinet of Zdravko Krukabic since November 2020. He was a member of the expert team in the parliamentary in 2020, having studied previously at Osaka University in Japan, Tsinghua University in China, and in Paris as well. Mr. Spajic worked for Goldman Sachs and was partner of Das Kapital in Singapore from 2017 until 2020. And finally, Taimour Jumblat, who is an MP in Lebanon, taking over leadership of Lebanon's Progressive Socialist Party from his father, Walid Jumblat, in 2018. He's a member of parliament for the Shufale district and holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the American University in Beirut, a master's degree in political science as well from the Sorbonne in Paris and in France. Each of our panelists will offer some initial reflections before we move into discussion, during which we'll into the chat. We'll take those as the time comes, and finishing with time 15 minutes before further discussion in the spotlight insight sessions to follow. So without further ado, please let me hand over to Zarifa for some opening comments. Zarifa, over to you.
Hi to everyone. It's my pleasure being among young leaders, being among you people, and sharing my history, the story of Afghanistan, the story who are trying and struggling hard towards gaining their rights as humans. I am really blessed representing my generation, women of this country, and young leaders of this country.
Help me to become like more immune to the noise of the daily life, and that you have to focus on what's important. I joined the Goldman Sachs money making machine immediately after my studies, and started on my own fund. And I realized how important the relationships are throughout the Goldman's tenure. Relationships are best built by the frank discussions, and obviously, like knowledge of the languages helped me a lot. I speak 6 languages, but sometimes they say that English is a language that speaks to your brain, and the local languages like the Chinese or Japanese, etc., they speak to your heart. So that's one of the things that helped me a lot through my career. Also, I would mention that some of the important stuff that people have to think when they are joining the careers is personality match, and the challenges that people are facing. The personalities, it's important knowing your personality, knowing who you are, and then once you understand that, it's important which battles to choose and which challenges to fight, so that they energize you rather than they spend you. Thank you, everybody. I'm really pleased to join the panel and discussion, and really want to learn more from our participants as well.
Well, thank you, Moluka. It's fantastic to have you with us. And Taimur, last but not least.
Yes, good morning. I'm going to start with basically just saying a general idea that trust is a component for any relationship, whether it's personal or professional. Trust leads to dialogue, dialogue leads to compromise, compromise leads to basically a solution to whatever problem you have. If I have to talk about my own country, as I'm sure a lot of you know, my country is collapsing because of its system. Its system is a confessional one, and its system, the government is basically responsible for the mismanagement of the financial crisis in the past 4 to 5 years. Almost all of the institutions have collapsed, and then COVID-19 hit, and the explosion at the port of Beirut made it basically impossible for the young generation, especially the rising generation, to actually trust the government in anything that happens when it comes to politics. It's a very toxic environment that we're living in, unfortunately, at the moment, because the political parties don't agree with each other, the political leaders don't trust each other, and unfortunately, even when it comes to the civil society, most of the parties involved don't trust each other as well. They don't agree on a common platform, on a common vision to basically strive towards the future. But they all agree on one thing, and this is the difference between the political elite and the young generation. They all agree on one thing, the young generation, is basically the system has to change one way or another. The problem is our environment altogether in the Middle East. I mean, we're still in the Middle East, sadly, and change doesn't happen overnight. It happens through patience, through trial and error, through trial and error. Unfortunately, what is needed right now for persons like myself and the young generation is to strive towards a common system that basically ensures social mobility, and it ensures people, especially the youth, to aspire for more. And the only way to do that is through dialogue, through conversation between the political parties, or some of them, and the civil society as well, to plan ahead and to learn from the mistakes of our past and to acknowledge the mistakes that we made in the present tense. In my case, as a young politician, I'm not yet a leader, unfortunately. I'm still a young politician like many others like myself. I have an additional challenge that basically is hindering my efforts. When people look at me, they always look at somebody who belongs to the political system. So it's a problem in itself, because I have to prove myself to them that I'm capable of change from within, from inside to the out. I have to reform my own political party before I try to change the country altogether. It's going to be long. It's going to be a long and bumpy road, unfortunately, but the only way we can achieve a solution, or to reach a solution, is through a conversation. We have to start one at least. Thank you.
Taimur, thank you very much. Did all three. Thanks, many thanks indeed. Some really important themes. certainly will pick up on this theme of dialogue and conversation, Temel, which you raised so prominently and fascinating. It'd be nice to draw on your experience, Maloika, someone who speaks so many languages. Certainly, you're tired of talking communication working in different ways. Perhaps we can explore some of these dynamics too. However, first, perhaps I wonder if we could come back to this fact that here you are. I'm certainly privileged to be here talking to the three of you who are young public leaders in your own right. You have gained the trust of those in your countries who have elected you into prominent positions, leadership positions in political life. How have you built that trust? Who'd like to come in? Maloika, go for it.
Sure, no problems. I was about to say ladies first, but no, we can start off. I think it's important to gain the trust by the fast and quick results, and the fast and quick results stem from actually thinking in advance and trying to predict constantly thinking about what could happen, and constant. In Japan they call it PDCA, plan, do, check, act, and that kind of feedback loop or that kind of A/B testing has to be happening in real time. And if you do that, you will be able to kind of adapt to the new situations much faster, but also you will be able to predict upcoming trends much faster. So if you do that, you would be probably ahead of the curve, and it will give you an advantage to kind of to have a perception of giving fast results. I'll just give you an example. Like 2 days after I joined the office, we launched a bond offering of Montenegro's bond, biggest ever Montenegro's bond offering. And the way I did it is because even before I joined the office, I saw the Montenegrin treasury situation, that that we had a pretty illiquid treasury, and I knew that was the first problem we would have to face once we joined the office. So I was preparing like 2 or 3 weeks even before I joined the office. Officially with the previous Minister of Finance, we were preparing for that offering. So once I was in the office 3 days afterwards, I launched the bond offering. Also, the budget that we prepared is the first ever programming budget in Montenegro. I know in Europe it's a pretty common thing to have, but in Montenegro we are lagging behind. And programming budget, for the people who don't know, gives a lot of transparency and granularity to the expenditures. So we managed to save like 10% of the total budget by just having a transparent overview where the money is being spent. And by doing that kind of stuff, like you give the results even before. Now we are living through that budget. We are executing on the budget, and the people can see that like our fiscal deficit is like within the 3% of the Maastricht, as well as our debt levels. They were really unsustainable just a while ago. They are going down. So that's always to keep an eye on the future is very important.
Thank you, and thanks for that example. So trust coming through, delivering, acting, doing, and this plan, do, check, act. This dynamic of action is something which builds trust. That's a very helpful insight. Zarifa, I wonder if we could turn over to you at this point, and perhaps you could say more about the incredible experience you've had, the challenging experience as well, it sounds like, in Afghanistan.
Thank you so much. All generation with all sorts of background. Trust building is not an easy job, especially if you're young, you're female, and you are from no political background family, no political support. So, especially like in a place like Afghanistan, where everything is connected to who you know and who you are and where you are from exactly. It took me really a lot of time and energy to build the trust and image I have today in my society and worldwide. And still working on it. Most three important points that I am also noticing, it is communication on at the starting, communication is really essential for the trust that you want to build among you and your audience. Giving you also more wish from you, what they really want you to do for them. It really makes you to find the way and work and reach your goal. And last but not least, it's active listening uh, is an important part of trust building. You need to listen, you need to hear, and then you need to focus, you need to make plan, you need to work on it, and deliver the thing that people really loves it. I meet people like in my work. I meet people and
Zarifa, there seems to be some challenges on the line. I don't know if that's just me, but perhaps the tech team might be able to assist us as we go on. But certainly, I was hearing as you were talking this emphasis that trust doesn't just happen. You don't just gain it. It demands intentional and ongoing effort. And these points you raised about communication again, about connecting to people's needs, about actively listening to those that you're seeking to serve and to help, to plan and act. I think this is very important, and certainly seems to me to resonate with Maloiko. In addition, Taimur, perhaps we could turn to you. In addition, from your experience, how did you go about building this trust as you entered into political life?
To be honest, I think it depends on the country you're talking about. For instance, if I have to talk about Lebanon at the moment, I mean, most of the government institutions collapsed, and most of the financial institution as well. So the most important thing right has the benefit of being supported by the international community. The only way to move forward is to show people that we are willing to make reforms in our own country when it comes to politics and when it comes to the financial institution as well. If I have to talk personally about my own experience as the son of a politician, the only way forward for me is to make people believe and make them trust me that I am capable of change, that I have to reform from the inside out. The most important thing is to reform from within before we talk about reforming the whole country. On a level of a country, like I said, the most important thing is to form a government that basically is in tune with what the international community is asking for, and to have early elections at the time, at any given time, whether next year or the next, but with a non-sectarian law, to allow people from all corners of the civil society and the young generation to enter parliament to basically decide their own political future. And this is the most important thing, I think.
Thank you. Zarifa, can you hear us again? We were having trouble with the connection, but are you back? Are you back with us? Still seem to be some challenges. Zarifa, if you can hear us, please do add any comments into the chat discussion as we continue to move forward. I'm keen not to get bogged down, as us academics sometimes do, in conceptual distinctions. But when we think about this idea of trust, there are different models which combine components together. The Edelman indicator famously combines competence, with back to the 90s, often used, combines together as elements of trust, ability, benevolence, and integrity. So there again, the idea of character comes through. This is obviously a theme we work on here at Oxford. But I wonder if there are any comments from panelists on that score as well. So thinking about acting and acting with competence, but how about this other element of personal character, of ethics and integrity?
If I have to say, I apologize if I interrupt anybody else, but in my case, unfortunately, like I said before in my introduction, when people look at me, they don't see me as a competent person, or not as a competent person. They don't see me as who I am. They see me as the son of somebody else. So the competence is basically based on the history of my family. So one of my major obstacles in life and in politics as well is to prove to people that I'm actually not just only my father's son, that I am capable of reform and that I am capable of modern thought and thinking. And it's a bit difficult when it comes to Lebanon because our system is very confessional. I mean, it's historically very confessional. After the end of the civil war, basically political parties took control of the politics in Lebanon because people at the time were afraid, because we were under, the Syrian regime was basically controlling Lebanon at that point. And people were afraid. They usually relied on their own communities, their own political leaders to offer protection and security. But after, in the past 2 years, after the civil movement basically arose in Lebanon, it's no longer the case. So for the first time in our history, we have to rely on our competence and our integrity to actually prove to the people that we're capable of doing something way. And this is, I'm talking from my own experience, basically, as a young politician, not yet leader in Lebanon.
Thanks, Tim. Malika, would you like to come in?
Sure. While in Goldman Sachs, one thing I learned is that being so-called long-term greedy is, or having that long-term perspective and being ambitious, not stifling your ambition, but at the same time putting it in the perspective of the long term is probably the key thing, and for instilling the trust. That the people would understand that, of course, you have your interests, and that's natural. Everybody has the interest, and every country has their interests, but not over dead bodies, and that these interests can be achieved through the long-term process in respecting other people's interests and other countries' interests. So I think that's one very important thing, as well as the. I mentioned the hyperinflation in Yugoslavia. That was like really tough time for us in the early 90s. I think that hyperinflation was probably highest in the world after Germany in the 30s. And what it makes out of you is that you have to kind of learn to adapt fast. That mark to market can be pretty brutal, and if the you have to take on the things very proactively, and you have to be on top of your toes, ready for an action. I think that's also extremely important as a part of the character. In the terms of the competence, absolutely. I mean, like the doing the things that are going to the battles that are already. You have to pick the battles. That's one of the key things that people have to understand. Mentioned before, I use the Myers-Briggs or the Jungian, just to be very practical, Jungian, some of the Jungian measures to kind of check the personality traits of the people, and these personality traits can tell us a lot. It's like a short. Of course, it's not everything about a person, but it's a shortcut to a person, understanding a person better. And it's extremely important that we pick the right challenges for us. Why? Because you have to. Everything good takes time to build. My partner at my previous fund at Das Capital in Singapore, he created a company from scratch and went to IPO in 2 years and 11 months. in Japan, and that's probably the fastest I have ever heard. And I think that would be probably a bare minimum that a human being needs 3 years to build something that's sustainably good. And in order to survive 3 years in some challenging and like a hardworking environment, you really have to be energized by that. And in order to be energized, you really have to like what you're doing. And I think that's really important for to as a key takeaway for me.
Thank you very much. Zarifa, I think you're now back with us. Hopefully the internet's working a little bit better, Felix tells me. Can you hear us okay?
Hear you once again.
So we've moved our discussion particularly to think about this theme of the, I guess, the inner side of trust. Along with competence goes character. The Edelman Index tells us. Others talk about ability, benevolence, and also integrity. And we're seeking to explore, well, how about these inner dynamics? How do we cultivate trust when it comes to character as well as competence?
Actually, in my case, from the starting of my job, there were just few youths supporting me across the country. They were not from my city. They were from other cities. They were supporting me. But now, thankfully, all people from my country, from my city, from where I am representing, they supports me. Actually, as I told you before, the communication and making the flow to break the gap between generations makes you reach what they really want. So whenever you really got what they really want, and you got the ability to work forward it, to really understand it, and then make it better, it and break the gap between generations, and then find that they're really their exact wants and needs and essential requests from you. You can really work hard to that, and that really needs to if you want to make trust, if you want to build trust, you need to work on that. As per my own personal experience, I have been working with, at the starting of joining my office for 3 months, I was regularly having meetings with local people. Doesn't matter, they're women, they're children, they're youth, they're elders, with different parties and different generational representatives. I got meetings. I received their ideas, and I collaborated back with me and myself and my plans. So finally, I received and I found a way to work and how to work. And now I have the full support of my city with all this ongoing conflicts inside my country, and all the insecurity and insecure situation that I am facing after 3 times armed attack by Taliban. I'm still working as a mayor. I'm still doing my job. It's just because I build the trust, and more importantly, it's really as Mr. Minister mentioned, the character, the ability that you are who you are, where you came from, and what you want to do. What's your plan? This really makes work easier to build good trust among people and your work.
Zarifa, I wonder if we could stick with you. I am in absolute awe and admiration of your story and how you've come, as you explained it, without this political background, and yet at 26, having finished in the University of Punjab, already you're elected mayor in Wadak province. You engage and go, and you have navigated serious challenges since, but before as well, standing for some really important issues. Can you say a little bit, how does that story happen? How do you become mayor of a major province at the age of 26? It's quite phenomenal from my perspective. I'd love to hear any more insights from your experience and that story.
Thank you so much. Actually, working for governmental sector or being mayor, it wasn't something more important goal for me. Like it wasn't a specific goal. I have a radio station. I have my NGO. So I was working with these two private sectors and wanted to follow it up after completing my bachelor and master from Punjab University of India. Being back to Afghanistan, I established my radio station, worked on having an NGO working for women rights and women education. And then I went for a parliamentary elections for youth parliament of Afghanistan, and I was representing youth from the same city or same province where I'm working now as a mayor for 2 years. And then it was just I wanted to just make a try if I could win it, but thankfully among 138 candidates for the same position, I was the only female, and I got it. I succeed, and I got the degree of president. It was so tough. From that starting, when people got that there is a female competitor, and she is part of this competition. Uh, just because of my gender, just because of I am a girl or I am a woman, they started treating me so bad. They started people around, especially men. I'm really sorry to say this, but they really started hurting me. They started to make problems for me. And finally, after long-term struggle, after when I got the degree of president, for being announced to my office, still I wasn't able to join my office just because there were some people, they were making rallies, and they had some staffs, and they were ignoring me, they were ignoring recognizing me as a mayor because of just my gender. So after 9 months of struggle, I got announced to my office, and I started my work. And it was also not so easy. It was also full of risk from the starting of the table, from the starting of the session. I faced 3 times armed attacks from Taliban. Uh, my dad, at 5th November 2020, they killed my dad just because of my work. Murdered my dad in front of our house. And so still I'm fully putting my life in rest. I know how hard I'm doing. I know how hard moments I'm going through. I know how my family feels, especially after my dad's murder. And as I am the young elder child of my family, I'm responsible for my 7 brothers and sisters, and as well my mom now. So it's really hard managing personal life as well these this professional life, being a mayor for a technical office of municipality. But thankfully I'm trying hard to manage it because to trust between my pupil in city and my citizens of my city, and it works right now so well. And I'm so happy for what I'm doing now. I think I'm blessed being a mayor for a beautiful city.
Zarifa, your story is incredibly inspiring. Your life is, and yeah, I'm very sorry to hear of your father and the extreme difficulty that you're facing. But your commitment to continually serving the people there in your area in Afghanistan is extraordinary and inspiring. I wonder if we can keep going with this theme that you raised, Zarifa, as well, and that we've touched on already on communication. And of course, the relationship between words and trust is all important. If trust is, and something important about trust is about trusting people to do what they say, to deliver on the promises, on the change that they might hold out. how does this communication aspect work actually in practice? Maybe Timur or Miloiko, you could come in on that one.
When it comes to practice, if I have to talk about my own country, it's a bit difficult for one reason. I mean, as a Lebanese people, I think the civil society can change a lot in Lebanon. They can actually aspire to have more transparency in government and the financial institutions. But when it comes to politics, our politics is a bit complicated because it depends on what happens around us. So I don't know if we can do much about this subject. No matter what happens in Lebanon, everything that happens around us can influence what happens in Lebanon. So we can only change what we can in our hands. We can only establish trust by basically trying to improve the lives of citizens in Lebanon. The most important thing right now in Lebanon is basically one thing. Politics has taken a back seat. Basically, people just want to live in a country eat clean food, drink. We can build trust is basically to ensure those things. But when it comes to politics, unfortunately, it's bigger than us. At least this is my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe my colleagues can say otherwise. But this is concerning Lebanon and our situation in the Middle East.
Continuing on Lebanon, just for a second, Timur, there's a question from
Yes.
Nasser and Adel, a similar confidence in the government, and what might the next steps be to overcome some of these challenges, do you think?
I think the most important thing right now is to form a government that is in tune with what the what the international community wishes for. I think the most important thing is to apply reforms right now. Otherwise, we can talk and talk, and it's not going to be much of service because the most important thing is to supply the basic needs for the Lebanese people at this moment. Maybe the government that will be formed right now in the next, I don't know, maybe a year or two is going to be temporary. But the most important thing is that there is a government to implement the reforms that basically the IMF asked us to do. This is the priority. I can't, to be honest, I can't think 4 or 5 years from now. I can only think right now what's the most important thing. Change will happen eventually, but it's going to take time. Because as I said before, because of our geographic location in the Middle East, and because of the nature of politics in Lebanon, what happens outside can influence what happens inside. But the only thing we can do right now is to implement the reforms that the IMF told. And that means forming a government, whichever it may be, at the fastest way possible.
Thank you, and thanks for those insights. We certainly trust and have confidence that you will continue to contribute as you are to this process of change, and we wish you well as you do so. Miloiko, perhaps could draw you in here, still on this theme of the communication, but perhaps in more detail, and how practically as a leader you've learned to communicate, ways of communication that in your experience have enabled you to gain confidence and trust of those around you. I mean, you've had this remarkable experience across different countries already through your life, and speaking in different ways. What's that taught you about the different ways you need to communicate and how you can go about building that confidence?
So just to know that I'm extremely honored to share the panel with the other two panelists, and Zarifa's story is really humbling, and it's I'm learning a lot through hearing her experience, and that reminded me of one of the principles that I'm also trying to stick with is the radical ownership. What does it mean of the tasks in general I'm trying to, like person should strive for taking everybody else and everybody around in the team members and the people under that they are managing. They should take as their results should be their own results, and they should take it that way. We should, I think about the whole team as personal results. We shouldn't put the blame on others. We shouldn't. We should just like as Zarifa is doing. She's taking responsibility for not only her city and part of her nation, but she's also taking responsibility for all of her family. And that's a goal. That's like a beacon of light that I'm also striving towards. Once you take that kind of stance, people can recognize that. People can recognize honesty. People can recognize hardships and the sacrifice that one is taking. And once you have that, you'll gain the trust from the people below you. When I say below, not in a vertical sense, but in the sense of the management. And the people around you, and you would definitely have you would gain much more trust from, then the words are less important. The emotion that you are spreading and the leading by example with your radical ownership and the sacrifice that you're taking is really important for convincing the people that you're doing the right things and you're on the right path.
Maloika, thank you. Well, time, as ever, rushes on when we're in the middle of good discussion. But there is one final question. It's an excellent one from Kalina Todorova, which is perhaps a note we could finish on. And I'll go around each of the panelists in turn. And Kalina asks, what a good leader needs to be in 3 words. If you had to sum up a good leader in 3 words only, what would those 3 words be in your view? Perhaps, Zarifa, could we go to you first?
Who really understand people, the situation, who can really build the trust, who can really mix the trust and this situation and work on the plan as people wants, as people wishes, toward their work, toward their dreams. So I think good leader needs to know who is he or she, who is her or his audience, and exactly what you want to do and what's his plan or her plan.
Thank you. I love that focus back on that self-understanding of a leader. Who are they? Who are you? What is it that you want to do? Help others. Thank you so much. Taimur.
Yes. I think I agree with Zarifa on one thing, on many things, but mostly one thing is the way to have a conversation with the young generation. Because part of the problem that I face in Lebanon is basically when I open my mouth and discuss politics, it's always going to be, I always have to be careful of not hurting the older generation and at the same time bridging the gap between the older and the younger generation. Because let's face it, specifically in this time and period, Lebanon is trying to cancel each other out. The young generation is trying to cancel the older generation, and the older generation is trying to cancel the younger generation. So I have to be careful with my words. And that stems from experience with talking to people. So I have to set an example by basically understanding the need to have experience like the older generation, but at the same time understanding the younger generation's need to change the system. So I agree with Zarifa on one thing, is basically I have to adapt. And I think in my experience, since I've studied abroad and I lived most of my life outside, I can actually contribute to that. Maybe I don't know if I can contribute to that 100%, but I can try my best. And the most important thing is to start a conversation with all parts of society. And the conversation has to stem from one reason, from one point, is that we have to change. The system has to change one way or another.
Well, thank you for that note, Taimur. Very important indeed. Finally, Maloika, if we can go to you for 3 final words, your 3 words on what a good leader needs to be, what would you say?
I would think of being empathic and trying to learn the others' needs and trying to focus on others. Number 2 would be to be able to prioritize and be focused once you prioritize, laser focus on that. Number 3, I would say to be resolute in execution and delivery, but at the same time be flexible, because the execution is also, I mentioned the A/B testing. Like while executing, you also have to keep an eye on the results that are coming out of this execution, and to be constantly rethinking the process. Are you on the right path, and are you actually on where you want to be, on the path where you're headed towards? So I think these are the 3 things that everybody should keep in mind.